What's going on, guys? Today we are talking about the Insta360 X3 360-degree camera. There's a lot of questions, and I will do my darndest to answer as many of them as I can think of, such as why a 360-degree camera over a traditional action cam? Or why am I talking about the Insta360 X3 instead of the Insta Go 3?
Does it have a cup holder?
What are its resolution capabilities?
How much battery life does it have? Is it waterproof?
What does it feel like against your skin?
Does it record good audio?
How responsive is the touch screen?
Can you use it in space?
Are there lens protectors?
Okay, enough. They get it. There's questions. First, why not this guy, the Go 3? Real quick, the battery is internal, so you can't pop in a fresh battery. The storage is also internal, so you can't pop in a fresh SD card. And it charges via the little magnetic little pins that you stick it to that are whatever, and that's supposed to hold the camera too on an action cam. So that's a no on all of that for me. Also, white is very conspicuous when you're out there in the field. So no, I'm not talking about the Go 3. No, I said I'm not talking about, okay, you know what? It's cute. There, I said something positive. Now, back to the Insta360 X3. Really quick, the stand that it's on did not come in the box with it. The only things that came in the box was the camera, a cable, and a little cozy thing, so that way you can slip it over the top and have it have some protection, which is nice if it doesn't have a stand. This stand is from my own collection, so yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. It came with a little wipey cloth and, you know, the instruction pamphlet thingy, which always gets thrown away right away. And that's all. That's all that came in the box. It was very simple. In an upcoming video, we're going to take this guy to New Smyrna Beach, Florida, which is on the other coast from me. And we're going to go to a couple of skate parks. Then we're going to go to the Cape Canaveral seashore to put this thing to a real field test. And that will give us footage to come back to the studio and talk about the Insta360 editor. And I'll have some insights on all of that, obviously. In this movie, we're going to go over the upgrades that had occurred from the Insta360's X2 version to the X3 version, as well as the rest of the specs from the X3. Then we're going to go over the shooting modes that had come preloaded on here, the new and the old. And then we're going to cover a couple of the cons that we did find. And then after that, we'll do a full menu walkthrough. Released almost a year ago, the X3 is a major upgrade from the X2. But if you already own the X2, should you upgrade? Well, let's look at the differences and you can decide for yourself. The first big upgrade was the fact that they got rid of that little dangly door issue that you might have seen on a lot of different cameras and in a lot of different products over the years. The dangly door thing, thankfully, has been phased out of production lines, and we've actually got real hinged doors that lock. And these doors, amazingly, have little orange buttons on there, so that way, if it's not closed all the way, you'll see a little bit of orange. And that means that you need to go back, make sure that the door is fully closed, fully locked, and you shouldn't see any orange. A little security measure there, which is really nice. Number two, the battery life is about 10% more on the X3 than it was on the X2. It was about 60 to 70 minutes on the X2, and now it's 70 to 80. It's about 10 more minutes, which honestly can be extremely helpful when you're out there and you're like, I just need a little more time. This gives it to you. And there's where the SD card is as well. It's right in there that you can pop in and out really quick, really easy. Okay, number 3, there's been a quick menu button added to the side of the device that lets you go through a bunch of customizable presets that you can have set up in here. And it actually comes with a bunch like skiing or biking and hiking and things like that. And a bunch of extra slots for you to fully customize your own. Let's take a look at it real fast. Pull up one of these settings and you can change its parameters, come back in and overwrite it. You can add or subtract however many you want to be in your quick menu list. And those quick menu settings were not available on the X2 version. 4th major upgrade from the X2 to the X3 were the sensors. We've now got two 1/2 inch 48 megapixel sensors as opposed to the X2's 12 megapixel sensors. While the resolution of the X3 did not see an upgrade from the X2's 5.7K while recording in 360-degree mode, the quality and clarity of the footage is so much better, and so is the color coding. And that's because of the aforementioned better sensors that the X3 has than the X2, 48 versus 12. Number 6, coming in at a whopping 2.29 inches is the new screen. It's a wonderful touchscreen that's very responsive, and obviously it's so much easier to use than the X2's 1-inch circle of like unusability. Okay, number 7, the X3 has had a lens switching button added to the bottom of the device right here, right below the screen. So that way you can switch between back lens only, front lens only, or 360-degree mode. While recording in 360 mode, you can switch your preview from the front to the back with this icon, or have picture-in-picture by starting on one or the other and hitting this icon. You could also just spin your view to what you want to preview with your fingers on the screen. Later on in this video, I'm going to show you how to change this button from switching between the lenses to switching between video mode and photo mode, but that's in the menu section, which is later on. The 8th major difference between the X2 version and the X3 version is that they've added a bunch of shooting modes to this device. We're going to go over all of the shooting modes, the old ones and the new ones, in the section of this movie devoted to shooting modes. But first we're going to go over the rest of the X3 specs. First on the list is thank you so much for making the USB charging USB-C. That allows me to charge this device anywhere and anytime I want. In the car, while I'm camping, doesn't matter. Restaurants, hotels, there's always a USB port and always a USB-C cable somewhere that you can get this guy charging. The second spec I'd like to talk about is the fact that this bad boy is waterproof up to 33 feet without a dive case. I'll repeat that, 33 feet without a dive case. This guy is waterproof. Third major spec is the fact that they've got 4 microphones all over this device, and that's so that way it can record sound and store it the same way it records and stores 360-degree footage. In other words, when you're in the editor and you point in a certain direction or you look in a certain direction, you will also be listening in that direction. So that way you can isolate sounds you want. Number 4, the Insta360 X3 shoots 72 megapixel photos. I'll repeat that, 72 megapixel photos. Number 5, we got 8K time lapses, which means that you can really quickly throw your camera out there in the world and get a time lapse. And instead of needing some sort of automated arm to get any kind of action, you just move around in the 360-degree footage to get that dynamic shot that you want. Okay, this next set of specs are what really sold me on the X3 and why I'm still talking about it all the way in the future of its release. flow state stabilization is the first one. What that is typically when you stabilize footage, you will have, let's, for example, say you shot in 4K. So we've got this 4K box here. And if you want to stabilize it, we're gonna have to punch in. So the second box is the punch in, what we're actually able to look at. And we're gonna move this box around to compensate for any of the jitteriness or actions from the camera. And the more jittery or more shaky the footage, the more we're gonna have to crop in, which is commensurate with how much resolution you're going to lose. Whereas with the 360 and Flowstate, instead of having the 4K box and us punching in, we have a 360-degree sphere. And then you put that 4K box inside of the sphere, and the 4K box does the stabilization. So there is no loss of resolution when you stabilize. That's incredible. Number 6, that flow state stabilization, working in tandem with number 7, which is horizon lock. It's always keeping track of the horizon. So when I go like this, typically a camera would lose all semblance of what the horizon was. But if you look at the footage, I can do this and it stays locked forward as if I'm not really turning it end over end like that, which is amazing. So flow state stabilization, keeping everything beautiful, and the horizon being tracked automatically allows you to just walk around and kind of just enjoy your life. Number 6 being flow state stabilization, as well as number 7, which was horizon lock. We've also got number 8, which is direction lock, which allows for when the cameraman is in motion for us to either look in one direction, regardless of what the cameraman does or turns or looks at, or have it locked, so that way anywhere the cameraman moves, we move in the 360-degree world, looking at what the cameraman wants us to look at. And what's really awesome is the direction lock, as well as a lot of these other decisions, you don't actually have to make while you're in the field. You make them in post while you're sitting in the office at the editor. We're on to shooting modes. We're going to talk about the new shooting modes that came on the Insta360 X3. And then we're going to cover the shooting modes that are on the X3 that were also on previous versions. First mode we're going to talk about is single lens mode, which is either using the front lens or just the back lens only. It shoots in 4K now, whereas the X2 only shot in 1440. The only drawback I do have with the single lens mode is when you're in the editor, you have a few less options. Number 2, while in single lens mode, you can switch between 9:16, which is portrait, so that you can post to social media, or 16:9, so that you can incorporate it into a video such as this. Okay, number 3 is me mode, which is a very interesting setting wherein it takes both lenses and points them straight down at the base of the device. So that way, when you put it on a selfie stick and stick it out in the world and you walk around, it has software inside that cancels out the selfie stick. So that way you get this very strange, like drone look that's out there floating in front of you, which is very cool. Me mode is in 1080p, 60 frames a second. So it's not a very large resolution, but you can slow down the footage to get a little bit of that slow-mo action. Bullet time is essentially me mode that shoots at 4K, 120 frames a second, or 3K at 180 frames a second, which is not too shabby. Only issue is you cannot reframe the footage in post. What you shot is what you got. And now for the modes that are on the X3 that were also on previous versions. Starting with number 1, time shift, which is very much like a time lapse, except for this is to be used in motion. So you hold it and you walk. and it shoots at 5.7K 30 frames a second. So speeding it up is great, and using it at regular speed or slowing it down just a little bit is possible. Okay, number 2 is interval photo shooting, which allows you to take a photo every 3 seconds all the way up to every 2 minutes. You can switch between 72 megapixels or 18 megapixels for less important photos. Number 3, Burst Shot takes 9 rapid photos. You can set a timer for this, which is kind of cool, but it sees a resolution of 18 megapixels, so you can't turn it up to the 72 megapixel when you're using Burst Shot, which is kind of sad. Number 4 is Starlapse, which is designed to take a bunch of pictures of the sky that you can pull up in your editor, and it will play through the JPEGs very smoothly. Number 5 is loop recording, which I personally need to start using more often as opposed to just recording ad infinitum and having to cut the footage down. What loop recording does is it makes a loop of your recording at either 1 minute or 30 minutes. So you can continue to record as long as you'd like, but when you hit stop, it'll only keep the last 1 minute or 30 minutes depending on what you set it to. Okay, number 6 is HDR mode. Lots of cameras have HDR mode. You may have used it before. HDR always makes your footage look so much clearer, crisper, better shadows, better everything. But HDR on most things makes the camera very, very, very hot. And this is no exception. The machine gets hot all on its own when you're just using it, but if you do use it with HDR, it gets red hot real fast. So I recommend using it sparingly. That is a crazy amount of capability packed into one little device. That being said, no equipment is perfect. All gear has cons. I thought that was important to say. Other YouTubers have complained about the audio quality on the Insta360 X3. Honestly, for an action camera, it has fantastic audio, and it's able to record in 360 degrees and all of the isolation stuff. All microphones, regardless of whether it's this one, these, the green one I use at my desk, it really doesn't matter. All microphones have their specific, I don't know, qualities, taste, flair, whatever you want to call it, attitudes. Some of them are bassy, some of them are trebly, some of them are really high pitched, some of them have no bass. You're gonna have to compress and EQ your audio regardless. Moving on. Really lastly, the only other con I found was the fact that they did not, and I'm stating this again from earlier in the movie, that they did not upgrade from the X2's 5.7K in the 360 degree world. The X3 is still stuck at the 5.7K. Look, it doesn't affect me personally, and if you're buying the Insta360 X3 before you had gotten the X2, you're great. Just like me, it doesn't affect you. But if you had the X2, I feel like it would be very heartbreaking that there was no upgrade. Especially if you were trying to validate it to your family, you wanted to buy a new camera and they're like, look, the resolution's not any better. What do you want it for? The bigger screen like this, that's it? It's hard to validate that. So I do feel for the X2 users who wanted to upgrade, so I did include that in the cons. I mean, if you're twisting my arm, I'll come up with a third con. I don't think any settings on a camera made after 2020 should have any settings that are lower than 4K. So when you're using one of the settings and it reduces the quality to like 1080p, it's kind of messed up. I mean, for a higher frame rate, I can see having to step back to the 3K. That's cool, no problem with that. But when it comes to the rest, come on. It's after 2020, nothing should be under 4K unless it's some extenuating circumstance. It is now time for the full menu walkthrough. A little swipe right, opening the left side of the screen, opens the media files, which you can play back and actually look around in your 360 degree footage to check that you've got the shot you wanted. Screens are all swipes except for up. To open the bottom of the screen, they make you hit this little HUD, which allows you to change the resolution and frame rate. The 5.7K resolution has 24, 25, and 30 frames per second available. But if you pull it back to 4K, this gives you the additional frame rates of 50 and 60 frames per second, allowing you to slow it down over 50% if you wanted. The lowest resolution you can set this to while in 360-degree mode is 3K. That gives you 100 frames per second. That's really great for slowing down 360-degree scenes. Swiping left, opening the right-hand side of the screen, reveals camera settings, auto and manual. In auto, you can still change the color space from standard to log and vivid. You can change the white balance, the exposure value, and isolated exposure. In manual mode, you can do those things as well as change the shutter speed as well as the ISO. Finally, swiping down opens this cute little menu with all these little icons. Here you can mute and unmute function sounds that happen when you touch buttons, change screens, or power on or off. That's always the first thing I kill with all new devices. The next guy on this portion is the indicator lights, which I also turn off on all the devices. It's super conspicuous having any lights or sounds or even vibration modes going off when you're out in the world. Which vibration is the next one over here, which I also turn off. The last one on this little square plate is actually really cool. Quick capture enables the camera to begin recording as soon as it can from an off position. So you turn this on so that you can hit the shutter release button right here on the front of the machine, and it'll boot up automatically and begins recording. In a controlled environment with predictable subjects, quick capture is obviously unnecessary. But when you're running and gunning through the wilds or cities or at action events, these moments of gain or loss can make or break capturing the unpredictable. The fact that you can turn it on and off to save battery if you want is really nice. Okay, audio controls are top right, starting with microphone settings. We've got stereo, which is left and right, and back in this menu, the icon confirms it for you. Wind noise reduction, which I don't really use, but this is what the icon looks like. Lastly, we've got directional focus recording for the audio, which records sound from all directions with its array of microphones and somehow stores this audio information the same way as the 360-degree video files. So the audio will focus in the direction you are looking in the Insta 360 editing software. Okay, that's insane and I love it, and the icon looks thusly. The next one down is AirPod connection for wireless audio for playback. Continuing down one more is the Bluetooth remote toggle. Going left one, you've got the screen dimmer. Left again, we've got the pre-recording ability, which through some sort of black magic or sorcery, after you press the shutter button, it travels back in time either 15 or 30 seconds and begins the recording before you started recording. Scary, but true, and awesome. I don't know if you need to call a shaman once a year to recharge this pre-recording ability, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Okay, so it seems that there's software inside that has a special splicing and anti-shake effect for when you put the lens guards on it. Next, we have the same kind of special processing for when you put the Insta360 X3 in a dive case. The last button, yay! This is a menu. Okay, real fast. The camera info, the device type, serial number, firmware version, audio authorization, hardware version, onware. Okay, next one is USB mode, UDisc or PC connection, or if you're using a quick reader, or if you want to connect to your Android. The next one is Wi-Fi. Next one is Bluetooth Wake Up, which allows you to turn the Insta360 X3 on from your phone or a Bluetooth remote. Voice control is next. Definitely, I've used voice control with action cams, and it is very helpful and useful. Sometimes it's a pain in the butt, but most of the time it's pretty darn useful. Anti-flicker, video bitrate. Make sure this is on high. Video sharpness. This has 4 levels, low, medium, high, and highest. Obviously, depending on how important your video is, you set it to what you think it should be. External mic gain. So if you're using an external mic, you can have some gain. Next, now these I use all the time. Auto sleep. Sometimes you need your device to turn off almost immediately after you're not using it anymore. And other times you will want it to stay awake regardless till the battery dies. You don't care, you want that screen to stay on. Same thing with the auto power off. I use that all the time for the same reasons. Sometimes you want it to turn itself off immediately, and other times you want it to just stay on forever. Language, for some reason, is next. All right, the next one, yes, you're gonna use this one a lot. Format your SD card. The moment you put a fresh one into any camera, format your SD card with that device. Next, we can choose whether this button on the front switches between lenses or between photo and video. Okay, next one, gyro calibration. Definitely do this every once in a while. So, factory reset brings your device back to as if you had just bought it and you took it out of the box. Obviously not physically, but software-wise, yeah. And the last one, certifications, which, whatever. Holy crap, ladies and jelly spoons, are you okay after all of that? I tried to find as much information as I could to jam into this video. We'll look at the field performance in an upcoming video, as well as the file types, and do a full editor walkthrough of the Insta360 editor. Links to this guy, lens guards, and a dive case are in the description below. Maybe a little camera like this might get you out in the world and doing more. Remember, unniche yourself. Give it a shot. A squid shot.